try to answer, and I have 9 points here in no particular order. Is what have we learned? Number one, God has chosen you to be the parent of your child or children and has also equipped you to raise them and educate them. If you think you can't teach them, think about this. Who taught them to walk? Who taught them to talk or feed themselves, to love Jesus, to share, to do basic chores around the house, to be responsible? You get the picture. You are a teacher, whether you think of yourself as one or not. Number two, wisdom from God is for the asking. So ask. He will direct you. Number three, there is no perfect curriculum, but there are some that may work better for your child's learning style. So be a student of your child. Figure out what their learning styles are and try to adapt your homeschool for their benefit, kind of like a personalized learning plan. Number four, one of the toughest things that I found was to undo the thinking in my head as to what schooling at home should look like. Both my husband and I were public schooled. I still wanted to keep the public school schedule and hours rather than adapt to the freedom to set our own schedule. So set your own pace of learning. Try to erase all those preconceived ideas in your head and say what works best for our family. Number five, some of the best learning took place laying on the floor, sitting on the couch, or being outdoors, not at a desk. Number six, we wished we had started much earlier. Once we got into it, we had probably our biggest regret was that we had not done this sooner. Number seven, the first year is really hard and there are many adjustments to your lifestyle and schedule, but don't quit. Rolling into year two and beyond, we got a rhythm and it became so much easier and better. Number eight, your family or those close to you may be your biggest critic. There are many that may have full family support, and there will also be many that have no family support. In our case, we had no support. When it came to home education, that just became a topic that was not discussed because it was not agreed upon. So, but regardless, make the decision as to what is best for your family, not the pressures of those around you. Number nine, one parent will be the primary teacher, but make sure to involve the other parent. Make sure both parents are supportive of the decision. As you know, there will be hard days that come and you will want to quit. And you need to encourage each other and focus on the reasons why you chose to do this. So the second question I will try to answer here are what were the keys to our success? And again, no particular order, but I'll say number one is number one. Prayer. Begin each day with reading from God's word and praying together. Number two, another key, very important point I learned very quickly, don't compare. Do your own family. Do not compare to any of the families around you. Don't try to be like someone else. Just because a certain curriculum or teaching method works well for another family doesn't mean it's the best fit for your family. In our case, my husband farms and works from home. So our son could spend the afternoons out in the shop with him in the winter time. We also schooled from October to the end of April. So we maybe had slightly longer days, but then had a season because of our farming to be able to, I'm going to say, do agriculture 101 as well. So Another thing we tried to do was one summer, a friend had suggested to me to try doing a little bit of schooling through the summer, because I found the break between April or May and October was really long, you know, especially for subjects like math. And so we tried one summer doing, you know, one lesson a week and reading good books throughout the summer. And, you know, it was really amazing come fall. The schooling really didn't interrupt the summer in any way. But come fall, you know, the startup was so much smoother, and really no review required to get going in the next level of math. So that was just something that we learned along the way. Teach your kids to expect setbacks, not perfection. Let them fail, and don't helicopter parent for schoolwork. When you're at home looking over their shoulder, it's really tempting. Number 4, find support. Find other families that home educate in your area and connect with them. Share or trade skills or childcare. For example, one family invited our son to join their gym time. Not much fun doing phys ed by yourself at home. And also an art class once a month. And in exchange, my husband taught their kids basic car and home maintenance skills and a shops class. So get together with some other moms even for an evening to pray and encourage each other. Learn new homeschooling skills. There's just ways, just find some support, find the kind of support that you need, and keep looking. I mean, there's lots of online as well, but it's great to have someone nearby. The other thing is connect with your community around you. We started a weekly gym night at a local school. I'm not sure that that will be possible this year. We also found that at the library that there actually was funding in their budget to give us an afternoon a month for our kids programming. I also found grants were available for theater and acting for arts training in our community, as well as a pottery class. And so our little homeschool group was a recipient of, I think, about a $1,500 grant to be able to do some of those types of things. Also, there's families in our area that get together, then book the local rink for an hour a week all through the year. And they just share the costs of that. So, or if you have a local pool, you know, check and do something like that. There's just lots of ideas out there once you get started. So number 6, evaluate. What are your family's values and your financial limitations? What activities or events will help you to develop things that are your values? Choose a theme Bible verse for your family for the school year, and repeat it often. It helps you focus on why you're doing what you do. And for sure, back to the evaluate and your values, you know, there will become many opportunities that come your way of things that you could do. But make sure and take time to say, does this fit with our core values, and is this something that we want to do? So one of the values that we had, a little theme that we had in our house, is character is more important than accomplishment. So just because you're having a bad day does not make you a bad person. Therefore, if poor behavior is shown in, say, the struggle to figure out a math concept, we would take a pause, close that book, stop and pray, take a break if needed. Deal with the character issue first, then go back to accomplishing the math page later. Relationships are really important. Then education will come. When a child feels loved, as Gerald was mentioning earlier, and understood, then learning can happen. So make sure to, create that loving, caring environment in your home. And it's sometimes hard, to lose the we need to get these tasks done, but at least in our home, the priority was character was far more important than getting that page done. Number 7, when you say yes to something, you may also need to say no to something. So guard your schedules. For us, our mornings, I would not take phone calls or distractions. That was time set aside to focus on schooling. Schedule your appointments in the afternoons, or choose, say, one day a week that you will fit those things in. Sometimes people think that because you are at home, you should be available anytime. And that's kind of sometimes a hard thing, to adjust to as well. So number 8, schedule time off. For instance, some families homeschool Monday to Thursday, and Friday is like a field trip day or a fun activity day. Have something to look forward to at the end of the week, not just for the kids, that's for mom or whoever is educating as well. So in my year plan that I would schedule, I would have schedule out certain days or weeks throughout the year. I had a book, or a weekly book, so I would mark off certain weeks or days off throughout the year, and I would schedule some breaks as well. And I would also just schedule in a little bit of extra time so that there was some buffer, so that if you were going through a real tough spell, or one of the kids was really struggling, or a crisis hits, which happened in our home as well, then you don't need to be so concerned about falling behind in your schedule as well. And that takes a lot of pressure off. So you've got to remember that in school, they have long weekends, they have parent-teacher days, they have teacher and service days. So, take care of yourself as well, and schedule yourself some days, and even schedule yourself a teacher day, and listen to some good homeschool speaker podcasts, or watch some YouTube videos, to recharge yourself as well. Number 9, delegate. When your kids are home during the day, mess happens. That is part of a busy learning household. Everyone needs to be part of cleaning and keeping things organized. So schedule daily chores into your schedule and part of your school day, and have scheduled times to do that, just to keep order for everybody. And number 10, recruit or network with others to assist in areas that are weaknesses and strengths. We all have areas that we were strong in. We also are keenly aware of our weaknesses. And I just like to share that God sent people into our life and opportunities that we never even knew existed. I'm going to say because of prayer, and the things that my husband and I didn't have skills in. It's amazing how God sent people in, and all of a sudden invitations were there. Was my child interested to do something? And yeah, we're really thankful for that networking and recruiting kind of community, and even if there's another family, say if one really is strong in science or something, maybe they'll share the science teaching with your family, and maybe you're good at the language arts or something, and you can even trade around a bit. Those are all good things to consider, but I would say, ask the Lord to guide you, to send people into the areas where you feel that you're lacking. So the next question would be, what made us keep going after our initial reason to homeschool had solved? Like for us, reading and spelling was a really tough one for our son. And it took about 4 months once we were home and chose a completely different style curriculum. And all of a sudden he was reading, and he was enjoying reading, and everywhere we went, he had a book with him, which was a complete change from what we'd seen before. you know, you look at that and say, okay, well, we were successful with what we wanted, and back to school you go, which is, I'll tell you the rest of our story later, which is what we actually did do, but things changed fairly quickly for us. So, so again, what were the reasons? What did we learn in that first year? What did we see in that first year that made us think, hey, this is something that maybe we would consider doing longer? So the first thing we noticed is that we witnessed firsthand the characters of the kids and families that homeschooled. As we got to know a few homeschool families that year, we really appreciated how kids seem to have that ability to relate to all ages, you know, from young to old. We saw teens having great conversations with adults, very comfortable with that. We also saw those same teens loving playing with a little 2-year-old and enjoying that as well. And just seeing those strong family values was something that we, you know, really noticed was different. Second thing was developing that love of learning, you know, in your home, and that ability that kids could take to just focus on things that they were personally interested in. Because you can get your academic part done, I'm going to say more quickly, it does leave your children with free time. And that's a wonderful opportunity to just take time and develop things that they're really personally interested in. For us, our son, he started just doing a hobby of radio-controlled airplanes, you know, in grade 7, 8, and then as he hit the high school years, he went on to study his pilot's license. And then as he graduated from high school, he went on to purchase a plane kit to be able to build his own airplane, you know, something we just never would have imagined would have happened had we not chosen that route for him. The number 3, we learned that it was a more efficient use of time. Our son had gone back to private school after the first year of homeschooling. And the second day, as I dropped him off at school, he said, "Mom, could I get homeschooled next year?" And then by about the end of the second or third week, he said, "Mom, can I get homeschooled now?" So, you know, I said, well, we can think about that. But right at that time, my mother-in-law had just been diagnosed terminal illness. She was in the hospital. I did not see how we could do this in the middle of a crisis as well as harvest season. But we took that before the Lord, and we did end up pulling him out of school. And it was amazing the responsibility that he learned in that season. So, you know, I had asked him, I said, why do you want to be homeschooled? And he said, you know, he had a very thoughtful answer. He said, you know, I can get my work done my academic work done in about 3 to 4 hours, and I'm not wasting time the same way. And he was really enjoying developing his own interests in the time outside of that. So that was just a real benefit. I just think, you know, God has equipped each of us with skills and talents, and just being able to have that time to develop them that you don't when you're away from 8 to 4, and then still have homework yet in the evening. You don't have a lot of free time to do that. So that was something we really saw and a benefit too. And the other benefit that we really appreciated as Christians is that we were able to choose a curriculum that had a Christian worldview, especially in the sciences, and that was a real benefit. And just that opportunity to just have spiritual conversations and infuse that into their daily life were things that we saw. So what are the benefits that we have discovered outside of just general academics? And I've got 8 points here that I'll just run through quickly. The first one, and I think one of the key ones, was parents and siblings are more important relationships than peers. You know, when they're in school, peers become really important, and friends are important. It's not that I wouldn't say that friends aren't, but just that the level of importance within your child's mind becomes, you know, as family, that being most important. The relationship that we developed with our son, and just getting to know him on a whole nother level, just allowing, having that opportunity for us for shaping his character more than other people shaping his character, that was a real benefit. Number 2, we also stepped away from the busyness of running to school activities and just enjoyed our family life together more so. Another thing was relationships grow deeper when you share daily joys and sorrows. So relationships are a real gift, and don't take them for granted. It truly is a gift to be able to spend that kind of time with your children. Having a teachable mindset, that was for me a benefit. You know, there are many things that we learn from our kids as well through the process, and through teaching our kids also. You do need to keep a teachable attitude as well, and that's a wonderful gift. Being able to apply spiritual lessons into their everyday life and into their schooling, that they aren't a separate thing, that our spiritual journey and our learning journey are coincide together, that they are not separate things. We also had to work at, when you spend 24/7 together, you have to learn to have a mutual respect for each other, and in both respecting both strengths and weaknesses. And yeah, sometimes tough slugging, let's say, but in the end, that is something that I've really just seen shine through. Also, the ability to think independently and problem solve. You know, if you have a question, kids learn how to figure out answers for themselves. They're not just looking to someone else for that. They own their own education, especially as they get into the upper grade levels. And also being responsible, their ability to take on more responsibility at a younger age than what society expects most teens, was also another added benefit. So, you know, how do I wind this up? Today, our youngest son is 23 years old. He has his own business. He's the youngest egg farmer in Manitoba. And he also works together with my husband and daughter on our family farm. They value what each person brings to the business. They work together well. As well, we also work together with our daughter and son-in-law, hosting regular gatherings for spiritual learning opportunities. Right now in my backyard, we have 100 people in a discipleship program as well as a family team effort. So yeah, the blessings that we get to see, you know, from these things. So I believe that what we have as a family is very precious and a true gift from the Lord. And I do think our opportunity to homeschool as one of those pieces that added to that gift. So thank you for your time.
Cheryl, thank you for sharing your story with us. It's certainly inspiring and great to hear. I know that there's questions that people have, and I would encourage you to use the chat feature to either make comments or questions. And Janelle LaFrance, thanks for your question about high school, and we'll be getting more on that tomorrow. But I would like to just let everyone know that we are going to be arranging for an ongoing opportunity to ask questions and get support. So on Tuesdays, starting on September the 8th, so next week, Tuesday, from 7 to 9, we will be continuing to have a weekly Zoom chat. So if you have questions, if you have issues, if you just want to talk about things, we'll be here on Tuesday nights to be able to talk about that. But that'll start next week. Our next presentation is actually by my daughter. Diane is here beside me. We're here in Arborg together, and I'm going to ask Diane just to tell you a little bit about her home education journey and share that with you as part of the panel discussion. So Diane, welcome.
Thank you. I am Diane, and my husband Tyson. We were actually both homeschooled, so we unfortunately cannot give you advice on starting homeschooling because we have always been homeschooling our children right from the time they were born. We always intended to teach them at home. We have 4 kids, ranging from the youngest, who is 4, all the way up to the oldest, who's turning 14 shortly. And I just want to talk about some of my tips and advice from teaching these 4 kids and over the years and the things that I've learned. And I just want you to know you're not alone if you're panicking just a little as you go into this fall and into this COVID, into this season. I mean,
or a lot, maybe.
Maybe a lot. I mean, maybe you're wondering, will I teach them enough? Will they listen to me? Will I miss something in their education? How will I keep my house clean when everyone's home all day? Did I pick the right curriculum? And I just want to talk about a few of those things and a few of those things that I've struggled with too. It's not just you guys, it's everybody. Every year we start fresh and we go at this, and we are all struggling to parent together. First thing I want to say is you are not enough on your own. You can't do it on your own. But thankfully, we serve a God who is enough. He fills in the gaps when we can't do it. For example, I was on bed rest at one point in time for 20 weeks, most of a pregnancy, because my baby was born early. And during that time, I barely had the energy to read a book to the kids. I was lucky to get food on the table and make sure they were safe and cared for. So school consisted of watching Magic School Bus and listening to some audiobooks and maybe playing some apps, and that was about it. We did very little school for a very long time. And at the end of that season, I did evaluate my children and said, you know, do I need to repeat the grade? Do I need to go back and do that math book again? And in the end, they actually were completely on level with where they should be. I honestly believe that God fills in the gaps. And there's other people in your life who can fill in the gaps too. And the other thing I want to say is it's quality learning versus quantity. It's so tempting to do all these fun different activities and curriculums and extra stuff, but even those little kids, ages probably up to age 10, shouldn't do more than 1 to 2 hours of school a day. If you do 1 to 2 hours of school that is engaged, interactive, real learning, you're done. If you start going longer than that, then it turns into busy work, crowd control, staring at the ceiling, doodling on your paper. And so you want to make sure while you're doing school, they're learning. Resist the temptation to do too much, to pull out all those workbooks. Just stick to the basics, stick to what's important. And use books that are exciting so that during the time when you're quality learning instead of quantity learning, the quality, let's say, if you pull out a book that says, birds have wings and their wings, this is how they fly. But if you pull out a book that's about somebody who built airplanes and studied birds' wings, or you pull out a missionary story about a country you're studying, or you pull out a book about somebody who was back in history, and you use those books and you read them to your kids, they're going to remember what happened. The other way, not so much, at least in my experience. I also remember what happened when I do that. And I would say pick your top priority for each kid, because every kid has an area where they need a little extra practice, a little extra work. So pick that top one and make that your priority. So for me, one of my kids needs to work on her math. Another one needs to work on her reading. Yeah, she's sitting right beside me. Reading and spelling. Another one needs to work on his reading. He's just needing to work on that this year. And my last one needs to work on his letter sounds. And so those are the priorities this year. And so we need to work on those first. So if you're having a bad day, if you get those done, you're good. And praise, reward, bribe, and praise again for any successes in those areas. And set aside the other areas if you need to until number one is accomplished. And then once you've got number one going, then pick it up again. So if you need to focus on math and you have to give up science for a little bit, then you do it. You focus on what matters, get that going, and then move to the next thing. Do you struggle with one child in particular? I do. Yeah, it happens. I mean, if you're going into this going, am I going to fight with my kids? Maybe you will. And it is definitely a struggle. It is something that you are now their teacher and their parent and their mom and their friend and their cook and their cleaner. And you have to figure out how to navigate that. So it's time to get creative. One thing you can definitely do is make some goals and some plans with them. Help them, talk to them, and let them choose some of their subjects. Let them choose which science they study. Doesn't really matter whether you learn about volcanoes in grade 3 or grade 5, unless you plan on going back to the school system, but even then, they will figure it out. So let them choose when it matters. Let them have some control. Let them set some goals. If necessary, outsource. Grandma taught writing last year to my daughter, and they had a great time, and I didn't need to teach writing to my daughter. And so use the resources that are around you. And remember, God calls us to be servant leaders. Sometimes we have to give up free time, hobbies, plans, hopes, dreams, and we need to focus on what really matters. I love planning homeschool events, homeschool groups, co-ops, but sometimes I just need to focus on the kids and on their learning and managing my household and not things outside the home. And I'd love to see my children excelling in math and writing, but sometimes that's not happening. But I need to look for the areas where they are strong and look for the areas where I can encourage them and where I can see that growth and potential in them. And the other thing, as I've learned with having 4 kids and people who I've talked to who have more than that, group things together, teach the kids together. It saves your sanity. When I tried to teach 3 different kids, 3 different sciences, 3 different histories, 3 different maths, 3 different writings, I kind of felt like I was running around a grocery store, picking up groceries in different sections, and then going back and forth and never really actually getting to the checkout line. So group them together. Science is easy to teach as a group. And history, social studies, language arts, if your kids are close in age, close in grade, you can do it. Even math, we did a fractions month and all my kids did fractions. And it was amazing how much the younger ones learned just playing games and manipulatives, and we just focus on fractions. And the little ones, you barely have to teach them. They absorb a lot more than you think they do. My little one was listening as we did human body last year. So we did Apologia textbook. I taught it to all of them together. So that would be age 3 to 12, 13. And he would come up and say, "Where's my heart pumper?" And did you know that blood is made in your bones and your marrow? Like, he came up with all kinds of crazy stuff. He was listening. He didn't look like he was listening. He looked like he was playing with Lego and standing on his head, but he was listening. So don't think that they're not listening. They're there and they're learning a lot. And then my other suggestion is to develop a flow for your day. You can have a schedule that's really exact and strict, and at times you can have kind of we do school in the morning. but make your own family's flow, your own kind of schedule. We do breakfast with a read aloud, because that's when they're all sitting there for a long time eating multiple bowls of cereal. I might as well be reading a book to them while they're doing that. And then we do our group lesson time together. So whether we're studying science together or history, this year we're doing Gather Round Homeschool by Rebecca Spooner, which is basically all those subjects together as a group. And then we do an active break, set a timer. 10:15, my phone rang and it was time to go do something active. They'd go jump around the basement. We have swings hanging from the ceiling in the basement, little trampoline, go run around outside, go for a bike ride, just get active. And then we had independent work where they would do their own math or their own language arts, things that needed to be done at grade level on their own. And then we had lunch and then chores. That's where you cannot keep a clean house with that many people in it all the time unless you have help. Hence the little slaves living in your house that need to do their jobs. And sorry, I just said that for my daughter, hoping for a reaction. Yeah, they've got to pull their weight just like you. So it's amazing how young they can empty garbages, they can do the dishwasher. That might not be homeschooling, but that's really important as a homeschool mom. If you want to keep with this and you want to keep your sanity, is everybody has to do their part. Everybody has to pitch in. So figure out a chore schedule. I do a mastery system where you do the same chore for a year and you have the same list. So they learn how to do it really, really, really well. And they know what to expect. They know what to do. And I don't have to maintain it. I don't have to manage it. I don't have to listen to, but they didn't empty the dishwasher yesterday, so now I have to do it today. It's just your job every day. So you do it and then you do it again. And then after that is free time, screen time, catch up time. And that is kind of how we run our homeschool day. That is kind of how we do our life. We have always been part of a homeschool co-op. Having a community is great. If you're only homeschooling really temporarily, maybe a homeschool co-op isn't for you. You maybe want something a little more relaxed. So see if you can find a couple of families in your area, a couple of families in your COVID bubble, and just get together. Let the kids hang out, let the moms chat, and my recommendation would be focus on activities, educational things that aren't core subjects, like the things that are hard to do on your own as a homeschooler at home. It's really hard to do a gym class with your kids. It's just your kids. It's really, really time consuming to do elaborate arts and crafts. But if you're gonna plan elaborate arts and crafts, you might as well benefit a couple other families worth of kids. And science labs, if you have high schoolers, maybe they can get together and make a mess with the science stuff, and at least there's a whole group of them to clean it up. As a homeschooler myself, that was my least favorite, was cleaning up science experiments. So, you know, if I had friends, it wouldn't have been so bad. I had friends, just if I had friends doing the science experiment with me. And maybe choir, music. Those are things that are a lot more fun to do as a group. So, you know, use the mom's specialties, get together, make a group, and do it together. So to finish off, when it gets tough, remember why you're doing it. So remember why you're doing it, remember what your first priority is, and stick to those things first and see where you go from there. Thanks.
Diane, thank you. It's always an interesting experience that I've had for a number of years when I talk about home education, and my daughter, Diane, listens in and chimes in and is part of these discussions. And now we have the continued part where Diane's daughter, Karen, is sitting beside her and listening in on these discussions and sometimes shrugging her shoulders and sometimes raising her eyebrows. But that's all part of living our life transparently with our children, and it's a lot of fun. Our next panelists are Mark and Lindsay Reimer from Beausejour, and I'm just going to find you guys. There you are, and pin your video so that you're on everybody's screen. Mark and Lindsay, welcome. We're glad that you guys could join us here, and we'd just like to ask you to share with us your story and some of your tips. I know that you just had a new homeschool information evening in your community recently, and there's a lot of people that are looking for that. So Mark and Lindsay, please.
All right, thank you for having us. We are Mark and Lindsay, we're from Beausejour. We have 4 children, ages 11 to down to 5, and we've been educating at home for 11 years in various ways. Now, I want to talk a little bit about why we educate our children at home. There's 2 main reasons, I would say, that we do it. Probably all the other reasons can fall underneath. And so the first reason we do this is because we believe that God has given the task of educating children primarily to parents. So I want to read 2 passages of scripture with you. The first is Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 to 9. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." And then in the New Testament, we have Ephesians 6, verses 1 to 4. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." And so in both of these passages, it's really clear that God has given the primary task of educating children to the parents of those children. This doesn't mean that parents can't involve others in the process. It's probably wise to do so. But we understand that only parents will ultimately be held accountable for the education of their own children. And we saw in the Deuteronomy passage that education of children happens in all of life. It's not just something you sit down and do for part of the day necessarily, although definitely need to do that as well. But it happens when we sit in our homes, when we walk by the way, when we lie down, and when we rise. This means it's all the time and every place. And for us, we think the most effective way to do that kind of thing is to have our children in our homes with us, so we can pour into them all day instead of sending them away for 7 or 8 hours a day. Now, related to that point here, we understand that educating our children is much more than just head knowledge. Even more important is that we shepherd their hearts. And so home education for us isn't mainly about the best way to do math or English or science. But when our children are at home, we are able to walk with them through their various emotions, when they get angry, when they get disappointed, when they become sad. We are with them all day, and we're able to sense what is going on in their lives. So while we certainly believe that our children, like other children, are sinful, they don't need bad examples to be sinful, we also realize that many children are influenced into greater sinfulness during the time that they are with their peers and away from their parents. I think we can all remember certain things we did that we shouldn't have done, that we did first with our peers instead of with our parents. But having our children in our home during the most formative years of their lives really allows us to shepherd their souls in certain ways that would be very difficult to do if they were gone all day. So that was the first reason we educate our children at home, is because we believe God has given the task of educating children and discipleship primarily to parents. Now, the second reason we do this is because we believe there's no such thing as a neutral education. So education is a worldview creation. That's what education is. We're creating worldviews. Education is not just learning facts, because when we learn even about facts, we necessarily learn them from a particular worldview. So the Ephesians passage we looked at, it teaches us fathers are to bring up their children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, those 2 words are discipline and instruction. That refers to the whole process of educating a child. It refers to everything that we do when what we call parenting or education. And we are supposed to do this, it says, in the Lord. So everything we teach must be from a biblical worldview. And education is never neutral. There's no such thing as neutral education. So if we learn about plants and animals from a biblical worldview, we're going to understand God has created these things for his glory, to display his wisdom and his beauty. When we learn history from a biblical worldview, we're going to understand that God is sovereign over human history, and he works all things for the good of his people and for the glory of his name. And there's purposes behind the things in our history that look rather chaotic. And if we learn mathematics from a biblical worldview, we're going to understand that math teaches us the constancy and the consistency of God, and that his truth, like math, it never changes. And we also understand that math and science and all the different things we learn really help us serve others. If we're building bridges or designing cars or whatever we do with our lives, that's what those things are for. They're for serving other people. And so we need to understand public education is not neutral. It might claim to be because they don't mention God, but not mentioning God is in fact a worldview, isn't it? Because if we learn about plants and animals or history or math without any reference to God, we will not really understand any of those things rightly. We're not going to understand them the way God does. And because public education doesn't begin and end with God and his truth, we will learn to think about the world around us from an atheistic worldview. That's essentially what you're probably going to pick up in a public school. And a lot of parents do public school really well, and they engage their children with those things really well when they're at home. So it's not an absolute, but during those 7 hours, that's probably what they're learning. They're going to be learning the worldview either of their teachers or of the civil government. So there's no neutral education. So we believe the best way to educate our children in the Lord is to do so at home, where we can teach them biblical truth. Now, I just want to close to encourage anyone who is intimidated or overwhelmed at even the thought of home education, which probably everybody, and there's maybe some good to that, but just two specific ways. Some of them have been mentioned, but I just want to maybe highlight certain aspects. So the first way is I want to encourage you to remember homeschool is not public school at home. So you're not a school teacher, you are a parent. You're not a professional, you are a disciple maker. And so your job isn't to replicate a 7-hour school program each day. And so this has been said, start with your children, build a relationship, and you can figure out over time what it looks like for your family to add in curriculum and add in math and those kinds of things. And it's been mentioned, get plugged into a homeschool group in your area if you can. There's probably groups all over Manitoba at this point. And a group can help you with some of the technical things that you maybe don't have answers to. But even more than that, they can reassure you that everyone feels like it's chaotic every year, and you change your math book repeatedly, and that's okay. None of us are experts. The second thing I want to encourage you in is to recognize that you are qualified to teach your children. If you are a parent, you are the right one to be teaching your child. Nobody's more qualified to raise your children than you are, because God gave your children to you. So God has designed the home, we believe, to be the center of discipleship for children. And it's very hard work, but anything in life that really matters is going to be hard work. But we can trust the Lord. He has instructed us to teach our children when we get up, when we lie down, when we walk in the way, all of life. And he has taught us to raise them in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And so when we trust in his way, he will really give us what we need to complete that task. And we've already heard a few testimonials really testifying to that God will equip us for the task he gives us, even if it's something that seems ordinary, like home education. So that is all I have.
And I hadn't planned anything to say, so I won't repeat all the great advice already given by all the speakers. But if I could choose one advice to give to people starting out in your first year, to really focus on your child's character, like I think has been already mentioned, but that more than the curriculum, focus on them persevering and learning self-control and caring about others and empathy, you know, the biblical character, love for their own family, and if you have to set aside books for a while or read different books for a while, to just focus on those, the character of your children, that you're going to see that they're going to be able to learn better in the coming years on their own and in school work, if the character is there. If that's your priority at the beginning, you're going to benefit from that a lot. So that would be my top advice.
Mark and Lindsay, thank you for sharing with us this evening. I really appreciate it, and we'll have an opportunity for some more questions as we go through things here. But just want to say thank you, and really appreciate the message and the sharing from your heart. What I want to do right now, just while we're getting the next presentation ready, is I put up a question for everybody. And just like to, in the chat, if I can ask, if you're sitting there, the question for all of you is, what are you most anxious or worried about in starting home education? And if you could take a moment and in the chat just share that aspect, and I think that would help in our discussion. Our next presentation, and I want to welcome Larissa McDonald. Larissa is from the Minnedosa area. Welcome, Larissa, and I'll. Here you are. Let's pin your video to get you up. I know, Larissa, that you've done a fair bit of talking with new homeschoolers in the Westman area, and you've had some seminars. I know that you did some well, I don't know if it's television, but some media stuff recently. It was great to see that, and I know the interest in Westman is just booming. So really appreciate your taking the time this evening. From a busy farm and a busy home. So Larissa, welcome, and would ask you to share with us this evening. So welcome here. I think you're muted.
There we go. There we go. I have my volume on now.
Okay.
Hi there. My husband Neil farms here on Minnedosa. We have 8 children. Our youngest is 3, and after that they are 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18. Our oldest just graduated this year. I wanted to start tonight talking about why we chose to homeschool in the beginning. I wanted to homeschool back before I even met Neil. It was kind of on the table as we were beginning our relationship. I knew I wanted to spend my days with my children, not to send them away for the best hours of the day. I wanted to watch them learn to read and to discover things. And I also wanted to be able for them to learn about God within the context of their schooling without having that negated and talked against while they were at public school. Then we got married and we had kids and we finally started. And since then, our reasons haven't changed. None of those have been negated, but we've only added to those reasons over the years. Now we would also say it's a lifestyle that we love. We don't have to meet the bus in the morning and then be home again at 4 to meet the bus. We don't have to worry about lunches and fundraising. We get to teach not only just about God, but it's incorporated in everything we teach. So we're talking worldview again, like they had mentioned earlier. And for us, a huge one has been individualized education. Our oldest struggled with executive functioning issues, organizing his books, keeping track of his books. He has a record for having lost a book in 30 seconds and we never found it again. He also has had symptoms of dysgraphia, so struggled with writing for years. And in his last year of high school was diagnosed with hearing loss. So that probably affected things for several years prior to that as well. We have a daughter with Erland syndrome, which ends up with a similar disability is dyslexia, but it's a neurological difficulty in processing certain wavelengths of light, so words would move on her page when she tried to read. That wasn't diagnosed until she was 14, but we had the blessing of having been using a Charlotte Mason based education, so a lot of it was stuff that I read aloud and then they responded verbally. She didn't need to be able to read in order to advance in comprehension and knowledge. We also have one that's probably close to gifted. And if he had been in public school, he would have been insanely bored. As it is, he can do his work at his own pace and spend the rest of the days doing the things that interest him, that he loves. And we've recently had 2 more young children diagnosed with hearing loss. So it will be interesting to see how that plays into things in the future, but we've been blessed that that has come after they've already learned to talk and to read. And so that hasn't been a factor like it has been for some people with hearing loss. So then our story about how we started homeschooling. I started with the same curriculum that everyone in the area used. I bought it used off of a mom whose kids were all older. And within a month, it was either that relationship with my son had to go or the curriculum had to go. So thankfully I chose the latter. And he was just not a workbook kid, and that was a workbook-based program. So we spent the next several years in using an ungraded curriculum. It was for ages 4 to 8. It was unit-based, and it was very strong Canadian literature-based program. It was called Come Sit By Me, and it had activities that we could just pick and choose what we wanted to do. And I tried to type A, tried to make sure I was covering all the different subjects every unit that we did. And it was a lot of fun, a nice relaxed way to do those early years. When he aged out of that, I was doing internet research and came across Charlotte Mason, and I fell in love with the concepts of that method. My son and my daughter, who was ready to start school at that point, also loved the literature, loved having me read to them every day, and so it was a good fit for us. We used what I would call a hardcore Charlotte Mason curriculum for 5 years, and then it got to the point where I needed more direction. I needed a lot more planning done for me. And so I looked elsewhere, and now we've moved into a Charlotte Mason based curriculum, but it also brings in other aspects like notebooking and more of a unit study feel to it. And it's a good fit for us. We've used Heart of Dakota now for 6 years, and I don't see us leaving it anytime soon, except for the upper years are US history, and so we will be switching out for Canadian stuff in grade 11 and 12. But it's been the framework that I needed, while also allowing us flexibility to combine subjects for some of our older kids, especially electives in LA in the high school years. So today I wanted to focus on what you as new homeschoolers can do to help you have success without actually saying you all need to look at this curriculum kind of thing, but what's something that you can all do that will help you succeed at homeschooling. Because of my history, when I more recently heard the term deschooling, I realized that that was kind of in fact what we'd done back then. Throwing out our first curriculum and my public school expectations of how our school day should go, and taking the time to discover what education meant for us, to discover what method and style fit us as a family. So now, though I've never had to pull my kids from public school, I strongly recommend that anyone who does research deschooling. And before you add any formal curriculum to your day, start doing deschooling. And it's like an extended summer break, except that you're doing it with a goal. You need to have the desire to learn what it's like to live 24/7 together, not just for a holiday, not it's going to be over and I'm going to send them back, but we're always together. It's a desire to make the transition to homeschooling easier and to let go of the expectations of what school should look like. So if you haven't heard of deschooling before, what does that mean? It means setting aside a period of several months, and they often suggest about a month per year that your kids have been in the system. So that's including kindergarten and preschool. And to do no formal curriculum. That doesn't mean you don't read, and it doesn't mean they're not learning. They sure are. So what do you do? Here's my top 6. There are many other things you can do, and including things like visiting museums and stuff that just won't work in this COVID world right now. But these are some things that I think are important to do, to make sure you do. Number 1, other than learning about God and teaching about him and working on character like the other parents have mentioned, number 1 is to read, and read some more. Read to them daily. Help them find books to read on their own, even if that's picture books at the young age. Let them see you reading. Find audiobooks you can enjoy together. And for some boys, maybe that's manuals that they read. It doesn't have to be literature necessarily, as long as they're enjoying reading. Number 2, cook and housekeep together. Having everyone at home all day means that more mess is made, and you need to work together, as it's already been mentioned. You can't clean and do school at the same time. But lessons can be learned through doing it all together, and those are invaluable. Math, budgeting, social studies, executive functioning skills, fine and gross motor skills, home ec, time management, and so much more. Learn to see in their everyday activities what academic goals are being reached. Number 3, create, build, and engineer together. You know those projects you've never had time for? The boxes the kids got for Christmas and they're still sitting on the shelf? Stock up on art supplies, build something, fix the broken mower, or patch a wall. Figuring out the how to do it is your homeschooling. Number 4, get back to nature. Even in an apartment during COVID, you can study the different kinds of clouds, the weeds that come up through the sidewalk, the varieties of bugs that live in a parking lot. But if you have a chance to get to a park or go on a hike, or if you live in the country, even better. Use field guides to identify wildlife and journal your finds. Nature study is the foundation of science. Number 5, watch documentaries and educational TV. The box on the wall doesn't have to be the enemy. The internet is alive with documentaries on everything. And follow your kids' interests. Watch TED Talks and follow an Eagle Cam, whatever it is that interests them and you, because they'll learn from your interests as well. And number 6 is possibly the most important: deschool yourself. Take this time to study your kids and to study homeschooling. What makes them come alive? How do they learn best? What areas do you see as both strengths and weaknesses in them, in you? Then take a look at the different methods of homeschooling. Take a quiz to help you narrow down what styles suit you, then do some research. Talk to others who use those methods and find out which actual curriculum that fit those work for them and why they don't or do. And those very reasons may be why they do or don't for you. Don't spend more money on curriculum until you know it's what you want. There's no harm in switching curriculum after a month or two, except for that financial investment. Try borrowing or buying used at first. If you can get your hands on it and visit another homeschooler that uses it and see what it looks like, you're much more likely to know whether it'll be a good fit for you. Join Facebook or other online groups to learn about different curricula and arrange buying from outside your area. One of the things that was on the topic list for tonight was about support groups. How do you find them? If you're in Westman, we have the Westman Homeschool Connection. It's a Facebook group almost only, and it's exploded, so you're more than welcome to join, but it's crazy busy right now. We had 54 new homeschoolers or those interested in July, 198 in August. So you're more than welcome to join us there. We have a series of posts for new homeschoolers, but we do request that it only be people who are in Westman. So sort of McGregor area, west towards Saskatchewan, and from the border straight up through the parkland, because I don't know of any homeschooling groups that are north of, say, Dauphin. So you're welcome to join us as well. The Matches has lists of people who have groups going, but there's new ones all the time. There's one specifically for people who are homeschooling during COVID in the Westman area as well. They've just started a new one for people who are looking to only homeschool for a year and put their kids back in school. There's been a couple questions coming up on the chat about high school. I can't really speak to credits then transferring into public school, but if you pull your kids and keep them home for the rest of high school, the reality is that a diploma is not as important as we used to think it was. All universities and colleges in Manitoba have procedures for accepting homeschoolers. A lot of us make up our own transcript so that those who are looking at their application can see what kind of topics you covered, even if they don't consider them equivalent. And I haven't heard of anyone who's had a lot of troubles trying to get into the courses that they want. You will want to, as they're in high school, be looking ahead at what those are. If they're looking at something like engineering and sciences, then you'll be necessarily wanting to do higher level science in your homeschool than those of us who had kids that weren't looking at STEM at all. My oldest graduated in the spring and he wants to be a barber. We have always gone to a school of hair design in Brandon, and he asked for an application form. Mid-COVID, he hadn't yet filled it out, and they called him and offered him one of 2 spots that opened in July. He is in his 2nd month, and he is doing way better for them than he ever did at home. It's something that he loves, and he's doing really well there and loving it. So my other kids, I'll do different things maybe for them, but for him, I didn't even need the transcript. So there goes all the hours and worry over making sure he had what he needed, and we didn't even use it. But for courses on our transcript, if we completed a full course, like for example, Institute for Excellence in Writing, then I would put that as a course. And then for other things like Bible, we would just accumulate hours. And once they finish 120 hours on that topic, then I'd call that a credit, and I put that on the transcript. So I hope it answers a few questions that were there. And that's all I have to say. Gerald, back to you.
Thank you very much, Larissa, and appreciate your just amazing multitasking and being able to keep your eye on the chat as well as talking. The sign of a successful homeschool mom and being able to multitask like that. So thank you very much. I would like to ask another question to everyone, and that's to ask, what are you looking forward to the most in home education? For those that are thinking about it and starting on your journey, to be able to share that. Good questions coming in, and we'll have more information about some of these things tomorrow in terms of particularly the post-secondary questions that are coming in. And one of the things that I'll just try and answer briefly for those that are looking at the possibility of re-entering school. One of the things that I've heard over and over again from parents that have done that or worked on that is working with the school and communicating with the school and being able to talk to them in terms of what requirements they would be looking at and how they'd look at that. So being able to have that discussion is going to be an important part of that. Our next presentation that I'd like to kick off and to get started here is with the Eamers, Paul and Ellison, and just Ellison is with us here today. Paul is at home or someplace taking care of the kids. So welcome, Ellison. Ellison comes to us from Stonewall. And Ellison, welcome here. Glad that you could join us, and we'll ask you to tell us about your story and about your home education.
Thanks so much, Gerald. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I really appreciate it. It's a great blessing to be able to homeschool and to share about our journey. But I also want to welcome all of you here, and I know that you're finding yourselves in a difficult, challenging, stressful situation, trying to make this choice to either homeschool, send your kids back to school, and you don't know what you're really wanting to decide. And it's hard. And I just want to say, you're doing a good job, that you're exploring the options, you're looking at what's most important for your family, what's going to work best, and no one can tell you what the best way to do that is. And so I just want to say, it's hard. Like what you're going through right now, I can't personally relate to it because I haven't taken my kids out of school, and I'm not trying to examine like what are all my best options. But just know that every year we have to evaluate, are we going to send our kids to school? Are we going to keep them home? This is the first year, actually, we haven't been asked whether we're sending our kids to school. A couple of years ago, it was because we were having twins. Hey, you're having twins. You're going to send your kids to school? Hey, your twin is sick. Are you going to send your kids to school? We get asked that question all the time, except this year. So I guess people can understand why we would choose to keep them home this year. There's some extra challenges and things going on. And so you're in a tough spot. Many of you, some of you are just here because you're choosing to homeschool. It's totally unrelated to COVID. And I hope everybody is finding some kind of encouragement in what's being said, whether you feel it directly applies to the questions you have and the experiences you're going through and the reason you're choosing to homeschool. I hope you still find something valuable from these conversations. Like my original reason for homeschooling, or our original reason, was because we expected to be missionaries overseas. And that has in 15 years not happened, but we have been missionaries in Canada, both with Youth for Christ, and we have our own mission organization called Heroic Family Missions. And we have moved a couple times. we just really wanted the greater flexibility to do mission work, to leave, you know, in a couple weeks or a month's notice to go to the mission field and do different things, and not have to constantly be pulling our kids out of school or trying to coordinate with school systems. So that was our original reason that we were considering homeschooling right from the very beginning. And now, yes, we did move. We moved from Winnipeg to Gladstone. We moved from Gladstone to Stonewall. We've been in Stonewall now for 3.5 years. We enjoy it. There haven't been a lot of homeschoolers in Stonewall until recently, in the last couple of years for various reasons. But you know, like we expand our reasons for homeschooling as the years go on, and they have really evolved. And so one reason being that the priority that we have as parents to disciple and to train our children, not only in the sense of education, but also in the sense of righteousness. That's our responsibility, to train them up in righteousness. And second, to be able to equip our own children for mission, to have a really missional focus in our homeschool. That's really important to us. And over the years, we've used all sorts of different curriculums. I've looked through curriculum books that instantly made me feel overwhelmed. So if you're going through that right now, where you feel overwhelmed looking at curriculum, we've all been there. It's difficult, it's challenging, and it made me feel underqualified instantly. You just open a book and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing all of a sudden. And you could be doing it for years and still feel that way when you open a book. And it's taken me a long time to realize that I really don't like teaching. I don't like to have to be the educator of everything that my children are learning. I have 7 children. I have one that we're expecting in 2 weeks. So if I shift around a lot, it's because I'm starting to get uncomfortable sitting down for long periods. And again, like, we have to, I don't like teaching. It's just, there's so many different things going on. You're interrupted constantly. I don't like to have to do that. And so, and then I don't enjoy it, and my kids don't enjoy it because it's not working for us. It's not right for us. And so we've had to really find a balance in what works for our family. And every single one of you, no matter what you choose, are going to have to find what works for your family. Some families, you have a shift worker there, and it's not going to work for you to do a 9 a.m. to noon, or even, 9 a.m. till 4, any kind of regular school schedule. You're going to shift and you're going to do an evening because that's when you're home. Or you're going to have to make a real specific plan to say, okay, this is my work schedule versus my homeschooling schedule. And it's going to look different in every home, and that's okay. And I want you to have that freedom to say homeschooling looks different in every home, and there's no pressure for you to measure up with what someone else is doing. So it's taken me a really long time to realize that I don't have to do it a certain way because that's how someone else does it. I don't have to like teaching and standing in front of my kids or educating them on everything in order to successfully home educate them. Because the fact is that God has created us all differently. He has wired us differently with different gifts and passions to use for his glory. And we want to do that to the best of our ability and teach our kids to do that too. And I can't teach that to my children if I'm not operating in that sense. And so I don't want you to have that pressure to think that, oh, well, Larissa uses this and it's really working for her, or Allison uses this, or Mark and, they said this. But you have the freedom, because of where we live and the standards set in our government, to do the things that are going to work for your family. And that is a huge, huge blessing. And if you're going to try to operate in the way that someone else does something and it's not working for you, you are going to be frustrated and exhausted. And I've been there. And so as I learn these things about myself and what's necessary for my children, and I evaluated what I needed, then I was able to find the things that work for us, right? I'm finding curriculum where the math is taught right on the page to my children. I don't have to have a separate manual in order to teach them. It's right there. And if they're struggling, I can come. It's right on their page. We can figure it out together. That's what works for us, not for me to teach every age, every level, all their subjects. And so like there's lots of people in our homeschool, we think that cooking and cleaning are essential services. We learn a lot about essential services these last few months, and those are essential services. Everybody's got to take part. It becomes very overwhelming if you are trying to do that in addition to, some of you are working, in addition to homeschooling. It just becomes part of what you do as a family, because that's how a family functions. If you live in the house and you make the mess, you got to do the work too. So that is something we definitely teach our children. Now, when it comes to missional homeschooling, we ask questions like, are you raising your children, or are you making disciples? And the answer to that is both. You can't really do one without the other. And that means that we also have to ask some more difficult questions, like, what are your family's priorities? What is really important to you? What's your purpose? What do you want your kids to look like when they turn 18? And what are you going to do to achieve that? Those are critical. For us, number one is that we teach our children to know Jesus and to make him known. This might look like having regular devotion times, but it's really incorporating what the Bible says in every aspect of life. It's not just sitting down for a specific small time, it's incorporating that into everything we do. So maybe there's specific times that we do have, like Bible education, but there's also acts of service. How do we serve others? Whether that's within our own home or outside of it, because it's hard to learn to serve others outside of your home if you're not doing it well inside your home, and that's very necessary. We work on memorizing scripture. Did you know, like some of the others are saying, that when you sit down and you're talking about something and your toddlers are sitting right there especially, they absorb so much. And I remember working on a passage of scripture when my son was 2, and he had it memorized before I did. And it was like 6 or 7 verses, and he knew the whole thing. And I'm like, oh, I'm struggling, and he's got it. So I'm learning it from him, right? They just absorb so much. So don't feel like they're going to miss some of those things. That we're discipling our children to make good choices and to have strong character. This stuff it's huge time investment, but it has far greater return than any other investment we can make in our time, in what we do with them and how we spend it. And this includes teaching them how to talk to people. In our home, that means we have a system that we use. It's called Raised Up. We teach it to other families. We teach it in schools. And that's teaching them just how to interact with another person to create value in the conversation, give the other person value. And as a family, we teach them how to share the gospel, how to transition conversations. We have training tools that we make available for these sorts of things to others too. We read a lot of missionary biographies because we want them to catch a vision for something greater and far more in life. And we use those for a lot of subjects. There's history, there's geography that we're learning through these missionary biographies. And so we do a lot of, those are called living books, where you get to learn about so many things through the eyes of someone else in a story form. So if you can think of things like Little House on the Prairie, it's true stories, right? Based in history. This is what life was like. You're teaching history, and that's a great way to do it. They will retain so much learning that way. And some of those subjects we've never used curriculum for, just because if we have those great resources, then our kids don't necessarily need to sit down. And they love to read and they love to learn as a result of those things. Next, we want to teach our children how to learn and to have a love for learning. And that's somewhere where those living books come in too. And if we can do this, if we can accomplish that in homeschooling, then our children can literally do anything they set their minds to doing. We have a friend who, their daughter hated science, hated math, all through high school. It was tears every day, and she just did not want to do it. And then what did she decide to be? She decided to be a paramedic and now a medical doctor. And you're like, what? But she was equipped to learn. So when it came down to it and she wanted to learn those subjects, she had the skills she needed in order to move forward and do those things that she was now interested in. And she excelled. She passed, she aced every exam, and she had great marks going through those programs. And so they can, when you give them those skills to know how to learn, to find information for themselves, to do their research and to learn and to like learning, because you've given them the resources, you've given them living books and things that are exciting, that help learning be interesting, then they have a greater desire to learn. And then the ability to look up whatever they want. So we work a lot with our kids' strengths and we encourage them in their weaknesses. I don't get too bent out of shape when a child's a little bit behind or not at grade level. I don't measure by grade level necessarily. I know when I report, I'll just say that, you know, they're struggling with math. They are struggling with math. But we work on having a good attitude, you know, just because they're not doing well with something doesn't mean they don't now have to do it. They do have to do it. They need to have a good attitude. They need to work hard. They need to ask questions when they're struggling, and teaching them to verbalize what they're struggling with is great. You know, God gives us and our children strengths and weaknesses. And if we can learn to be adaptable and not to measure success in worldly ways, then we and they can achieve so much more. So as an example, we have a child who struggles with math, not his favorite subject. You know, he should be at a higher level than he currently is. But he loves history. He loves it. Like he could consume anything I give him for history. He's actually read encyclopedia sets because he just loves to read and loves to absorb knowledge. Does he love math? No, but we plug away at it. You know, his knowledge in history is probably exceeds that of people going into university, maybe some who've been to university. But we plug away at the math. So he has a good foundation so that when he does need it or want to use it, then he has the skills there to be able to develop that further. But I let him spend a lot more time on the things that are of interest to him, that he wants to learn. And that's the beauty of homeschooling. You can say, okay, we are going to do these 4 pages of math, but then you get to do this. You know, and there's not quite the same pressure to keep up with classmates if they're really not understanding the content and they're falling behind. That's not helping them. So I want him to have a really good foundation for the math that he does have. You know, a friend, her son was interested in farming, and she was really struggling because he's like, I'm done with school. I don't want to do school anymore. I'm just going to be a farmer. And I said, whoa. Explore that with him. What does a farmer need to know? He's like, I don't need math. I'm like, yes, he does. You know, what does a farmer need to know? And how can you now transition that desire for farming to be his education? Because they need science and they need math. They need to know how big their fields are and how much seed they're going to need to order, and then how much chemical they're going to need per, you know, and what their inputs are going to be versus their income. There's so many things necessary to learn. How can we adapt and transition to meet those needs? Just because he doesn't want to do school doesn't mean that we can't now adapt, right? And what does that look like? You know, so I'm not saying throw away education and let him farm. I'm just saying, how can we present that challenge to him and to ourselves and adapt and help them move in the direction of that calling and passion that they have. And we can only do it if we're intentional and willing to adapt ourselves. If we are so rigid in a way of doing things, then it's going to be really hard for us to be flexible when our children are struggling. My brother struggled in school. He was failing grade 10 math. And thankfully, we're in a vocational school and they switched his program to tech math. So then he was learning, you know, how to measure for buildings and things like that. And he went from 50% or below to above 90% just in one semester, because now he had math that applied to life. So don't just say, oh, my kid sucks at math, or they hate math, or they hate. How will they love math? Let's try to figure that out. What is the area that they're going to see math as valuable? Make math real for them. Those are just some tips I have that way. You know, with homeschooling, we have so many options available to us to meet those needs and struggles in our families and our children, in ourselves. There's so many resources we have. And if we can equip our children with the tools to learn, then they can learn how to adapt as well. How to say, what math does a farmer need? You know, how to say, I love this. Now, what does that look like in a school setting or on an educational basis to accomplish the things that are still necessary to accomplish? No one's really touched a lot on a father's role, so I want to talk about that a little bit. And every family, every household situation looks different, and maybe you have different inputs that you have. Maybe there's grandparents who want to know how they can help. My husband helps their kids explore career ideas. You know, our daughter wanted to learn about dog training, so he's helped find her some videos online that teach her about dog training. And we have a friend who she goes over and she's helping train their dog with some tricks. And so he's helped kind of provide some of those tools and the training. And then also in the area of evangelism, he's a gifted evangelist. So how can he incorporate that into what we teach our children as we raise them up and what we expose them to then in life? He also, he has a passion for developing different tools to help people. So he has a course called the Parent Exam, and he did that with a group of fathers and asks really difficult questions. You know, we're talking about the priorities and the plans you have for your family, and what is your what do you want your family to look like? And then how now do you accomplish that? What are some of the things that you can do? So fathers have a great opportunity for teaching Bible, for teaching skills that they know, for just being there as a support, for being a firm voice in other areas, or teaching in a way that mom can't. And maybe it's vice versa. Maybe father's doing the teaching and mom's doing the support role. But it's just, what are your gifts? What are your talents? What are your abilities that you can bring to the table to say, here's what we have to offer together, and now how can we work together to make that happen? And just supporting one another in those gifts and strengths and talents. And then exploring what the other things are that that maybe you feel are gaps that your kids need to learn, and where can we find resources for that? There's great things online. You can get drawing tutorials online. I'm not artsy and crafty. That's beside my personality, but there's lots of other people who are, and one of my kids is. And so we just explore those things otherwise, because that's not a strength for me. So thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me share. And I really hope that you're finding something that's an encouragement to you. Thanks, Gerald.
Alison, thank you. Really appreciate your sharing. I think it's been very insightful and very helpful to everyone that's here online, and we've still got a great crowd. We have some questions that have been coming in, and I know that there's many questions. Some of these I'm going to defer to tomorrow. We're going to talk more tomorrow about high school and credits and choosing curriculum. So please hold those, and we'll be talking more about those. There's two things that I'd like to ask our panel to address here today. And the first one is how can I find a support group? We've had some suggestions that have been shared. Larissa, you shared your Westman Connection page, and great information there. We shared the Matches Facebook page, but there's so many groups and so many ways of connecting and trying to find a way to connect. I'm going to ask Diane to start just from her bit of experience in Diane. How do you find a support group? It's like they don't advertise usually. How do you go about doing that? What's your experience?
Well, my first experience was that I wanted a support group back when my kids weren't even school age, so I made one. That's basically the answer. If you can't find one, you might have to make one. And it's pretty easy because everybody wants one, so if you're willing to find a location and make a plan, then people will come. Winnipeg South Collective, I was part of for a short time. It's a big support group in Winnipeg. It's run by Karen Friesen. Just Google it, you'll find it, Winnipeg South Collective. That one's very well run. And that one's more of a homeschool co-op versus a support group. I've moved to Niverville since then. And so I was a part of a homeschool co-op in Niverville. As far as I know, they are full for the year because they plan a full year worth of activities. So I would say if you're trying to find a group, one suggestion would be to search Facebook for your area and homeschooling and see if you can find a Facebook group in your area and ask around on there. Feel free to ask around on various homeschool Facebook pages in the MECHS one, basically anyone you can find, and tell them your area and what you're looking for. And if nothing else, just find a few families and get together.
And it might be online. It might be just a matter of inviting some folks to have a little bit of a gathering with lawn chairs in a backyard someplace, or online. Certainly, lots of opportunities to do things online. I'm going to ask if other panel members have things that they'd like to share about support groups and their experience. Maybe Mark and Lindsay, you've been doing some things in the Beausejour area. Any comments from your perspective?
When I moved to Beausejour, we moved here 5 years ago. I didn't know any other homeschool families in this area. So I was still in the Steinbach area homeschool group for a while when we first moved here, but I started a Facebook group, and I had heard of another family that was homeschooling, and so I started a Facebook group, and others sort of started to join, and now we already have 35 families that are on it, just people moving in or friends I've made that are considered homeschooling and then decided to have young children who are getting into it. So it's growing, and I found that even if you just put it out there to your own friends, does anyone know anyone homeschooling in this area? Often, like, you just don't realize the connections that might be there. So Facebook is actually a tool for that for us.
Exactly. So there's certainly a number of different Facebook groups, and somebody just chatted that Winnipeg Christian Homeschoolers is another Facebook group in Winnipeg area. But just to put it out there and say, does anybody know somebody here was looking for something in South Central, somebody looking for something in Charleswood? Just put it out there, and people know people, and able to get connections that way. The other,
Gerald?
Go ahead, Larissa.
I've had to travel. We had ended up going for 2 years for an hour. We drove from Minnedosa down to Austin once a week to meet with the gym games group that met there once a week with our whole family. We'd take suppers and eat on the road. And although we don't do that as a family anymore, I still go that hour to go to a monthly moms meeting just to get the Christian fellowship of other homeschooled moms. There aren't any other, well, until now, the closest has been about 45 minutes away or in Brandon. And the parent group, well, Westman Homeschool Connection itself is not necessarily a Christian group. And so it's hard to sometimes pick out the fellowship of Christian homeschoolers within that group. And there just hasn't been enough to run a support group. We have it, and there's people end up not attending and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that in the future that will happen. But at this point, I'm traveling.
Okay. Well, thank you, Larissa. I'm going to ask, seeing as you're already on the screen here, Larissa, I'm going to ask you the #1 question that is asked around the world about home education. And that's, what about socialization? What's your answer?
How do you define socialization? A lot of people are thinking, how can you get your children to have friends? And in reality, it's only been the past 150, maybe 200 years max that we've thought that socializing our children within a group of peers is the appropriate way to do it. When you're homeschooled, you're socialized within the family and within the community. Most homeschooled children are able to communicate more effectively. As someone already mentioned, they might find themselves talking with adults or with a 2-year-old. They learn to communicate with those older and younger than them, even if they are awkward with their peers because they don't have the same values. They're not interested in the movies or the hairdos or the boys, but they can still have strong friendships and relationships with people from across the spectrum of people within their community. And I think that's far more valuable and will do them much more in life. As soon as they graduate high school, they're going to have to work in community, in a job place where they have people older than them and people younger than them. They don't get to hang around with only their peers anymore. And so I don't think that what they're asking is, I don't know, a well-worded question. If you want them to be able to communicate only with their peers, public school is the way to go. If you want them to be well-adapted adults that can communicate with everyone around them, homeschooling is probably going to provide that in a better way.
Thanks, Larissa. Alison, how do you answer the question?
Usually I rephrase our question. I said, is what you're asking, how do I keep my kids from being awkward or weird? Because I said, #1, there's a lot of awkward and weird kids in the public school too. And And socially awkward parents are likely to raise socially awkward kids. And I said, if this is you, then your best bet is to find resources that are going to help you learn how to connect with people. And then you can equip your kids to do the same. We personally offer a course on this called Raised Up, and it's how to add value to every interaction. So you can find me on Facebook if you're interested. We can actually run that virtually to help teach, like, how do we get our kids to interact with other people, or how do we know how to interact with other people that creates value? Because that's just it. Like, if you don't know how to socialize with people as an adult, your kids will have a very awkward time. My parents didn't spend a lot of time with other people. It was just family. So I didn't know how to ask questions and get to know somebody outside of my peers, right? People who were in the same position in life. I didn't know how to then interact with people. And so I've learned a lot from my husband in that way, and from other resources and books. You know, if we look at socialization, as kids need to be peer grouped in order to be properly brought up, then I'd like to use my twins as an example. Because what happens is, if I put my 3-year-old twins in a room by themselves and they're left to their own devices to decide what is right and what is wrong, then what is ultimately right is to climb up on top of their dresser, to open all the drawers and to empty them out, and to empty all the wipes out onto the floor, and to throw Duplo at each other. So when we group people by peers, we are putting them probably at a greater risk for foolishness than we are for learning proper values and how to interact with people properly. And so that's just it. It's everything seems like a good idea when you're around someone your own age who thinks like you. But I think that a child needs something more well-rounded than just peer influence. And that's something we can provide more readily in a homeschool setting.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to ask just one more. Mark and Lindsay, when you get asked the question, what about socialization? How do you answer that?
I don't know if we do a lot. Well, you maybe do more, but I
Well,
think,
can I ask you a different question then? So when you're family or your church, you can answer it. Okay, go ahead.
yeah. One of the socializations that you'll learn in public school is you'll learn how to do whatever it takes to fit in. That's the main socialization you're going to learn there, is what do I need to do to have people like me? And sometimes those are good things, sometimes they're not, right? And I agree with what everyone else said, that communication with the different generations is really important. You know, for our kids, I'm a pastor, so we spend a lot of time with our church. We have people in our house every week that are from their 60s down to children and everything in between. And our kids learn how to interact in those situations. And they're not perfect at it, and neither are we, I guess. But for us, definitely the church family is really important for our kids and their interaction with people outside of our home. They have also friends from the community, other homeschool friends and public school friends as well. But that is, for us, the central thing. We also happen to be in a church that has a lot of homeschool families, and so that kind of contributes, I suppose.
Thanks, Mark and Lindsay. Really appreciate that. One of the things that I'd like to ask here, just of everyone, is another poll. I would like to ask whether you can take a look at this poll, which is just in preparation for tomorrow. Would like to ask how many of you have a child with special needs or learning challenges, and just to help us prepare for tomorrow and what kind of interest there'll be in. That'll be one of the topics. So tomorrow we'll be covering some about special needs, particularly about curriculum choices and some of the different systems and methods that are out there. We'll also be talking about homeschooling through high school and university entrance. We can't answer all the questions. This is just a Reader's Digest condensed homeschool conference, very quickly going through things, and we realize that. But we do know that there's going to be a lot of questions, and that's why we're going to be featuring the the Tuesday nights going forward for at least 4 to 6 weeks, so that you can, on a regular basis, be able to ask questions and be able to get input and feedback. So that'll be something that starting September the 8th will be kicking off. Our time is up for this evening. I think I'd like to start by thanking our presenters for tonight. Really appreciate Diane and Mark and Lindsay and Larissa and Ellison for taking the time to spend with us this evening and sharing their homeschool, as well as Cheryl, and really appreciate that. Tomorrow we'll have 4 other presenters that will be presenting to us, as well as Bev Hubner, my wife, will be talking about curriculum choices, and we'll be spending time working our way through that. So really appreciate your time, and know that you still have lots of questions. Now we have recorded the sessions, and we'll be recording tomorrow, so in case you miss it, you'll be able to access that on the Matches website, or if you know of others that want to join in, they'll be able to download it as well and be able to listen to that. So this is the start. In closing, I would just like to pray with you and ask the Lord's blessing as you consider whether this is something that you should do, or work further on planning it. And we very much appreciate all of you joining us, and looking forward to more visitings tomorrow. So let's pray together. Lord God, I thank you for this evening. I thank you for the families that have shared their story, that have shared their journey and their struggles and their joys. And Lord, I just pray that as the many families that are represented here on this call, this workshop, that you would bless them as they consider what they should do, that you would help them in evaluating what's best for their children, because you have placed them in that special place to be able to guide and direct the education of their children. And I just pray your blessing, that as they prepare and think about this before tomorrow, and for the others that were not able to join us, that Lord, we would just be able to minister to the hearts of the people in a way that gives your way and your time. And Lord, we just thank you now for this time that we've had together, and ask your blessing as we go from here. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. The one question is asked, do we need to notify the government if we're homeschooling by tomorrow? Good question. I'll answer that right now. If you have been homeschooling on an ongoing basis, the answer is yes. There is a September 1 deadline. If you're new to it, you have 30 days from when you start homeschooling to when you need to notify. So if you're just starting homeschooling, that doesn't apply to you. September 1 deadline is not for you. That's something that you don't need to worry about. You've got some time, and we can talk about it more tomorrow. But don't worry about that. Tomorrow, there's other things to spend time on. Thanks for your time, and God bless you.